people are going to have to raise their voice. Go ahead. I know you don't want to do it. Nobody really wants to get on the phone with their congressman and senator, but you got to do it. You got to do it or you're going to be paying the price.
Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
We're going to be talking to some folks who represent workers at the Tennessee Valley Authority here momentarily. Really excited about this conversation, having them on to discuss the Trump administration's interest in privatizing the TVA, a move that could very well increase utility bills for residents of the Valley substantially, especially if utility bills in the state of Alabama are anything to go by. We're going to be talking to David Rutledge, Assistant Business Manager for the Laborers Southeast District Council, Chris O'Keefe, Business Manager for the Iron Workers Local 384 and President of the Tennessee State Building and Construction Trades Council, and Gay Henson, International Secretary-Treasurer for the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers, a current TVA employee on a leave of absence to fulfill her role as the International Secretary-Treasurer for the union. IFPTE represents white-collar workers at the TVA, and the Iron Workers and Laborers unions represent lots of blue-collar workers for contractors that do work for the TVA. David, Chris, Gay, welcome to the Valley Labor Report. We really appreciate y'all taking the time to talk to us.
Thanks for having us. Thanks.
Absolutely. Really excited to have... Really excited to have y'all on. Great, just a wealth of experience from the three of you, and a lot of experience with the TVA. And I just want to just jump into like why we wanted to have you on, and then we'll talk a little bit about a couple of your biographies. But you know, there's generally a pretty sort of low-level rumble about privatizing the TVA. I keep saying the VA, but the TVA, the Tennessee Valley Authority. You know, it's kind of always bubbling under the surface, but recently concern about that possibility has increased dramatically. David, can you talk to us about why your union and so many others are so concerned about the potentiality of the TVA being privatized now?
Sure, Jake, I appreciate you having us on here, and good to see you all, Brother Chris and Sister Kay. You know, ultimately, TVA is a system that's not broken. You know, it has been serving the people of the Valley for nearly 100 years now, right, since 1933. And it has delivered power to the people of the Valley. It's delivered value to the people of the Valley, and it's created thousands, if not, you know, over the decades, tens or hundreds of thousands of good jobs for people in our communities. And, you know, our concern is that if you were to privatize it, first of all, you're not going to improve service or pricing. You know, it's a well-known fact that when you increase value, or when you prioritize creating value for shareholders, you're not going to deliver better services or better prices. And so our interest is not in serving shareholders. It's about serving the stakeholders of the TVA, the communities and the people that live and work here.
Absolutely. And there was recently some reporting in the Atlantic magazine about some moves that the Trump administration has been thinking about making at the TVA's board of directors that has raised a lot of concerns about you know, their potential interest in this sort of thing. Gay, have you been following that reporting?
Yeah, I have. You know, I think there's a lot of misinformation out there. Really, I think, I'm very disappointed with our senators in Tennessee that have kind of come out and said that we're just not really managing things the way they should be, and we're not like looking forward, you know, to the new capabilities that we have to have, all the new technology. But we are. I mean, we have a debt ceiling. We have to deal with that. We have all these things that are in the way of that really these particular senators could jump in there and start helping facilitate along. We do have, they also say we don't have the people we need to get it done, and we do. That's not true. And then the future work, we're already in the process of organizing things to train new people to do the especially the work in our area. It's more of the I call it the nerdy work. It's not, it's white collar. But those are the people that build your schedules and make sure you stay in costs and all that. So we are on it. But I think they think we need to do something different. And I don't think they realize what a gem TVA is for the region and what it's provided.
Absolutely. It really is. And, being here in Alabama, broadcast, we're on the radio in Chattanooga and Muscle Shoals and in Huntsville, and stations across the valley. But, and I get my power from the TVA through Huntsville Utilities. And, there's been, just in the last 6 months, there is some reporting on utility bills within the state of Alabama that showed that people who get our power from the TVA, we pay 30 to 40% less per kilowatt hour than folks who get their power from Alabama Power south of the TVA servicing area. And, when you look at Alabama Power's financials, they get what's called a return on equity of 13.5%. That's 13.5% profit that goes to shareholders. That because the TVA doesn't have shareholders, you can just get rid of that cost entirely and dedicate that to making sure that residents of the valley have low utility bills and good, consistent service, which is what has been provided to people in the valley for 100 years almost. And so, especially being here in Alabama, I mean, the difference is stark, and I would not want to live, outside of the TVA servicing area. It's very, concerning for me. And one of the things that has really kind of kicked off this stuff is, something that's been going on in Cheatham County with John Rich. And, Chris, you and I were talking about this yesterday, about that kind of, that sort of controversy. And I thought that you had a really good, reaction to it, which, and can you talk through how you were thinking about this as it was happening and what you thought about the TVA's response to it?
Yeah, well, first of all, TVA is lean. It's efficient. It's effective. It's not a bloated system, right? So just like what Trump's asking for, that's what we have. We have a system that's free to our taxpayers. And then going to the John Ritchie situation, what we have right now is a public system who does listen to the community, right? We have local groups right now that have lawsuits against TVA. At the same time are writing support letters to keep TVA public the way it is currently. And in the John Ritchie situation, it seems as if he won, right? They listen, they're not going to build there. They're going to move it to somewhere else. I mean, that's a win, talking to a public entity and them actually listening to their community. It might not be exactly what they wanted, but they listen, right? I don't know if a private entity is necessarily going to do that, especially when their money's going to politicians, and then you have the politicians making things happen in a way that it's not happening right now with TVA. So in my eyes, they listened. They listened to what the community wanted. They didn't do it. They're moving somewhere else. And that's exactly what they wanted.
Exactly. And yeah, you're right to point out that the TVA doesn't get a budget for buying politicians like so many other private utilities do, including here in Alabama. And Gay, you mentioned that some politicians in Tennessee have reacted positively to the possibility of privatizing the TVA. We have a clip from WBIR. I think that station is in Chattanooga, where they got a quote from Tim Burchett. Let's play clip 2.
Congressman Tim Burchett told 10 News in a statement he favors the potential sale of the utility giant, saying in part, any option that maximizes efficiency, incentivizes transparency, and keeps prices low for ratepayers should be explored.
What are the underlying things and what are the data points that give evidence to that, right?
Responding to Tim Burchett was Steve Farner, LIUNA VP, Labor's International Union of North America Vice President, and that's exactly the thing that you have to ask when these things are being proposed. Trump wants to privatize the VA or the TVA, or some people within his administration do at least. And so the question that you have to ask is why? For what purpose? For whose benefit? And do you actually have any evidence to substantiate that privatization would be of any benefit? David, this was your vice president that WBIR was interviewing, so I'm curious if you had anything that you wanted to add to his response there.
No, I mean, Brother Farner said it right. The thing that's sort of baffling too is, Congressman Burchett, ever since he was a state senator and mayor of Knox County, and I'm sure Chris knows this as well, he's been pretty friendly to the building trades and has supported us over the years. So, it's a really disappointing thing to hear him say that. I hope that he would be willing to come speak to some of our membership meetings and maybe explain himself in greater detail. But certainly, to the very points he was making when we're talking about providing good rates to the ratepayers and transparency and a level of service, again, as we've all already been saying, TVA delivers that in spades in a way that no private company is required to do to its ratepayers.
Right. Sister Henson, you have been a part of political battles involving the TVA with the Trump administration before in the first term, and IFPTE emerged successfully. The specific fight was over a proposal to outsource some work within the TVA to a contractor that was owned by a French company or something like that. And IFPTE was like, no, these jobs need to stay within the TVA, and that's going to be better for folks, in the Valley. And you fought that battle, and you were able to get the Trump administration on your side. And I actually attend a press conference where you got Jeff Sessions, of all people. That's a name that not very many people have heard in a long time, but I was there, and Jeff Sessions was speaking on your behalf. And so, having been able to wage these, fights successfully, or talk to people that some might see as quote unquote on the opposite side of the aisle from where unions are typically perceived, how is IFPTE thinking about this fight, and what are y'all doing to engage with elected officials in the 7 states that the TVA provides service to and within the White House?
Yeah, so we're working really hard to get our members to go ahead and just reach out to their congressmen and senators. On that last battle that we had, Burchett was on our side on that, and this time he's really. I think it's a misguided thing. I'll be honest with you. I've talked to him personally, and he's been very upset about a quick little outage we had on Christmas Eve in 2023, I think. And it messed up his dairy farm. He had an issue, and he's really never gotten over that. But we are pretty. We almost never. That was very rare. TVA doesn't have. It's not prone to brownouts or blackouts or anything or rolling anything. We're just very efficient and very reliable. And I'd like to talk to him again. I'm going to. I talked to Cohen last week briefly, and he is against privatizing TVA. So that was good to hear. Here's what I think. I think the people that think they want to do it don't really know what they're saying. The rates would go up 10 to 15% on day one. And then they'll go up more than that over time, more like 30% total. That's a big difference for somebody who's just barely making it check to check. These hardworking people in the Valley, we're still one of the poorest regions of the country, and it's just an impact on people that I don't think some of these politicians understand. But we are really trying to get the word out to get people to go ahead and go to their Action Network. And there's also a phone number you can call. It's the Capitol Switchboard to let your senators know. I can give it to you if you need me to. It's 202-224-3121. They can call right in and say they want to let somebody know, and they tell them what state they're from, and they'll put them right through. So people are going to have to do that. I had a friend the other day that said to me, I like the transparency idea of TVA. I like anytime we can put things aside and do it with less bureaucracy. I said, that's what we're already doing. She didn't understand that we were really a public-private type company, and that we didn't get any appropriations from the government. A lot of people don't know that. And they think, well, yeah, it's time for TVA to quit doing that, because that's money I'm paying on my taxes. No, it's not. It's money you're getting back on your electric bill, and that's what it is. And then not to mention the other parts of TVA that people do not realize the impact it would have for TVA to be divided up and sold, or even just sold. And that's the environmental stuff that we do, the waterways and our transmission of electricity. All those things are part of the big thing of generating electricity. But then there's the thing where we keep this region beautiful. We keep the waterways clean, keep the dams and locks operating. All of this stuff is part of that TVA model that gives back to the community. It was basically created to give to this region, and that's what it's doing. So I might have gone on too long, but you get what I'm saying. It's like we got to let people know, and people are going to have to raise their voice. I encourage anybody that's listening, go ahead. I know you don't want to do it. Nobody really wants to get on the phone with their congressman and senator, but you got to do it. You got to do it, or you're going to be paying the price.
Hey, 5 seconds. Just wanted to say that this is only possible because of our donors. If you want to see more of this, then consider donating yourself at tvlr.fm/donate.
And, I mean, you just got to think of how could it be any different than increasing prices? Because if you privatize it, what that looks like is you have to, in addition to doing everything that the TVA is already doing, in addition to all the investments that it's making in new infrastructure, in addition to generating power for the residents, it now also has to provide profits to shareholders. Like, that's just a tax that is going to go to the people who would own the TVA that you would have to pay as a ratepayer. And it's super important that you pointed that out, that taxes, that the TVA has not actually gotten anything from the federal government as far as appropriations since 1979. It has been self-sufficient since 1979. And, you talked about the debt ceiling earlier that the TVA has. That's like a real debt ceiling that, they can't borrow more money, because the government will not let them. It's not like the debt ceiling that Congress has, which, is just always increased, right? And so the TVA is having to be a responsible steward of the dollars that it creates, the value that it generates for residents of the Valley, rather than appropriations concerns. And so we've been talking a lot about the value that the TVA provides for the community: low utility bills, consistent service, and you just mentioned the beautification projects that TVA does, improving the community. I wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about the TVA as an employer, because the TVA employs, thousands of people in both white collar and blue collar work, many of them, maybe even most of them, members of unions. Chris, can you talk about the jobs that the TVA provides and the impact that might happen if the TVA is sold off?
No, absolutely. I mean, you're looking at TVA supporting around 30,000 jobs a day. Right. That's including your skilled union trades, your engineers, your IT staff, your veterans. Right. Another thing that people don't realize is TVA for the new construction phase. They're averaging over 25% of apprentices. Right. That's way above anyone else in the nation. And they're wanting to get to 30%. Right. And some trades have it at 30% right now. And you want to talk about putting into the future of our children. That's part of it right there. Right now, even with that said, in my backyard, we have the Kingston Energy Complex, right? It's a 1.65 gigawatt site using natural gas, battery storage, solar. It's using unions, right? And it's using our MC3 programs, trades futures, apprenticeship readiness programs, right? And that includes Reset Knoxville that we just started in the inner city of Knoxville. And they're promising to put these kids to work on this new job, right? These are partnerships that also grow within this. Then you talk about the land that TVA has. There's over 293,000 acres of public land. That includes trails, campgrounds, 82 natural areas, 175,000 acres of open to hunting. So, I mean, these are all things that we all enjoy. I'm sitting at one right now today down at Douglas Dam, right? Enjoying a nice little area that we can sit, chill, and have this conversation. And then on top of that, talking about, TVA, yes, it's public, but it's dealing with 153 local power companies, right? And they rely on TVA's wholesale power. So if it wasn't for that wholesale power, we would all be at that 30-40% more rates than we're paying right now. So we're touching, getting with the kids and getting them in touch with trades and getting them into a career. And then we're talking about the land it uses for all of us to enjoy with our families. Right. And then the local power companies are also making their profit, but also doing it without giving it to us, if you know what I mean. Right. They're doing it at a cost that they have to keep their power utilities up and running, but they're getting cheap power from TVA and passing those savings down to us.
And David, you mentioned that while even though you haven't worked for the TVA yourself, your sort of heritage is all bound up in the TVA because I think it was your grandfather worked at the TVA. Can you talk about what that meant for him and how that has benefited you?
Yeah, I mean, just to tack on to what Chris was saying, it's not just about the legacy for the current workers and the apprentices and the future for them and their families moving forward. But, my grandfather, his first job with TVA was as a laborer on a road crew in 1953 after he came back from the Korean War. He pretty quickly was able to move up into, being a superintendent on the construction side and into management. And he retired in 1988, as somewhere in sort of middle upper management there, or upper middle management at TVA on the construction side. And I was 2 years old when he retired. He's still alive today. He'll be 95 this October, and he's gotten to be a full-time granddaddy and a full-time great-granddaddy to me and my cousins and our children, right? And the value that, and not to mention everything else he's done in our community back in Gallatin, Tennessee, and the value that has provided to our family and our community is incalculable, and the idea that, people will be able to retire at a decent age and have that kind of living for themselves in a shareholder value driven corporation these days is extremely unlikely. And so, that's something that everybody has a story like that. I don't think there's anybody on this call, probably nobody in the Valley area listening to this program right now who doesn't know somebody who has worked for TVA or is working for TVA and has seen the value that that's provided for their communities as Little League coaches and pastors and deacons and you name it, right? And so, that's something that, like I said, it has particular resonance for me, but I know I'm not alone in that. I think that it applies to the millions of people that are served by the TVA.
Absolutely. I mean, I was talking to somebody in management at the TVA just recently about how much they value being able to do for the community and how much they value being a part of an organization that pays its workers well and does right by them. And, and they were really concerned about the prospect of privatization. And, he was telling me that, like, it's not concern for me because he said that immediately after that news came out, he got multiple offers from private utility companies across the country that he has, met over the course of his work for the TVA, offering him significantly more money that he could make than he makes at the TVA because he would be in management at these other companies. But he doesn't want to do that because he wants to work for a company, for an agency that he can believe in, that has, service to the people of the Valley as its driving motivation rather than service to shareholders. Folks, I don't know really what to make about all the reporting about the Trump administration, like how seriously they are taking this. But I will tell you from my I was made more concerned about this situation from my conversation with him than any of the reporting, because here he is, this guy in management at the TVA, and he's like tearing up as he's talking to me. So this is not like, it does not seem to me that this is an idle sort of thing. Like this is just another thing where nothing is going to happen and everything's going to be fine and it's just Trump blowing smoke. I really think that folks need to be concerned about this and let your concern be known to your representatives. And so, definitely make sure you do that, and I'll be doing that as well because it's very concerning. Gay, as we're wrapping up, I'm interested in, a lot of people, when they think about the TVA and they think about utility work, they think about the blue collar workers and taking care of those folks too. But can you talk a little bit about your experience working for the TVA in the white collar section of its workforce, being a member of the Engineering Association, the IFPTE local there, and what it's been like working for the TVA, as an employer?
Oh, yeah. I've worked for TVA for decades. I don't want to tell anybody how old I am, but yeah, I've been here a long time. And I started out as a help physicist at the nuclear plant. which is radiation protection type work. And then I went into work management. But TVA is a great place to work. It's a great place to work because it offers people a good paying job, great conditions on the job. And TVA is a service organization. So everything that TVA does, all the decisions they make, I don't always agree with everything TVA does, and you're not. I mean, even in a marriage, you're not going to agree with everything your spouse might want to do. But I'm just saying, it's been a great relationship. It is a pro-union company, cares about union members, wants the union members to make what they need to be making for the job. And I kind of wanted to say that kind of work doesn't happen everywhere in the country. I mean, as I've gotten into the role at the International, I realized, even some of the Department of Defense and other places like that, it's not always as nice as it should be. And it depends on whoever your leader is. Well, TVA doesn't hire leaders and put leaders in place unless they're into the mission of TVA. And that's why that guy, whoever it was or woman that you were talking to, was tearing up. I mean, the thought of losing what we have here that gives back to the community it's heartbreaking. And we got great leaders. I was really pleased to see them pick Don Moll for CEO. Don Moll is doing the job. Like everybody says, well, he's going to make the $10 million a year that the last CEO. No, he's not. He's making somewhere around 1.5 million, which is, I mean, like anywhere else in the country, if you're running like this kind of energy company and all this other stuff too, their pay would be 3 times even what Lyash made. So, I mean, I never said Lyash was making too much. I just think Moll cares about TVA, and he's coming from the ground up, and he knows how to run plants, and he knows how to do nuclear, and that's what we're trying to move into. So I think TVA is really good at picking people from the ranks that know what they're doing and care about the mission at TVA, and I think that's real important. And if I can add one thing to what was said a minute ago,
yes,
community outreach is important. Community outreach is important. I think that you have to let people know, and they might not be it might be an unusual relationship that you're having with them in order to partner together to say, don't privatize TVA. But I've been talking to Appalachian Voices. I know they are against the privatization of TVA. And even though they've had some complaints about TVA, how they ran things and their transparency, but they also know this would be a huge mistake for the region. Jobs with Justice, Sierra Club, lots of people. So if you can get people like that to come out, like earlier when we had that issue with TVA that we weren't agreeing and they were trying to outsource the jobs, we had this huge rally in Knoxville. We had one like the one that you went to in Huntsville. We had it in Knoxville, and those people came out in force to hold up signs to say, no, you can't outsource this work and give it to, foreign companies. It needs to belong to the Tennessee Valley region. People that you would never dream were standing with us. And I remember TVA calling me afterwards and saying, hey, you hired some people to stand with you, didn't you? Those didn't look like TVA employees. I'm like, no, that's the community. And they're trying to send their message to you. And I think that's what we've got to do now is get the community to say, no, we're not doing it. It ain't happening, not on our watch. So we are capable of building what's needed for the future, for the AI stuff, all of that. And I think we just need to be left alone to do it. And one last thing, Trump, if he knew what he had on his hands here, he has a government agency. It's a government agency. He's got the biggest, big old muscle in his arm right now to pump up and use. Instead, there's this thought of privatization, which is just kind of dumb. So I hope he doesn't do it. I hope he get the message to him. So.
Absolutely. Really appreciate all of the work that all of you are doing on this issue. David Rutledge, Assistant Business Manager for the Labor's Southeast District Council. Chris O'Keefe, Business Manager for the Iron Workers Local 384 and President of the Tennessee State Building and Construction Trades Council. And Gay Henson, International Secretary-Treasurer for the International Federation of Professional and Technical Engineers, TVA employee in Chattanooga. Thank you all so much for your time. Is there anything else that y'all want to make sure that we get in before we let you go?
Yeah, I just would like to say one more thing.
Please do.
You got to remember where TVA came from. Private industry failed this valley. And that's why TVA was created, right? We're almost mid-century. And then we have a president who wants to have energy independence, job creations, grid upgrades, and not be paying a lot from the taxpayers. And like Gay said, that's exactly what he has. All the muscle he wants is right here, already happening, and it's not costing them a dime. So if we could just embrace that, have the Valley embrace that like we already have for the past almost 100 years, and then continuing to get that message across to the politicians who need to hear it.
You just saw a clip from the Valley Labor Report. We are live every Saturday morning from 9:30 a.m. till 12:30 p.m. And we pride ourselves on keeping all of our content free to everybody so that we can talk to as many working folks as possible. If you support the work that we're doing, you think that it's important, you think that it's good, then consider making a monthly contribution to the project, and you can do that on our website, tvlr.fm.
Which side are you on?